Good evening, everyone. Welcome again. Um, Thanks for joining early. See, we're just a few of us. As usual, we will just give a few minutes for people to join in before we kick off. I hope everyone is doing well. So just wait, maybe some 5, 6 more minutes before we start. Thank you. All right. So for those of us already here, I want to use this time to see. I hope you can all hear me. Please confirm in the chat if you can hear me clearly. Just want to be sure. And also if you can see my screen. Even though we haven't started, I am sharing screen. Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. Nice. Just want to, before we kick off, want to get some questions. If anyone has any question based on the last class, which had to do with shell scripting, right? Or any feedback? Did you try writing a shell script? How did it turn out? Did you try out some loops, some while loops, some for loops? What was your experience like? You can put in the chat or just raise up your hand. I'll give you the opportunity to speak. Or if you have any questions, like you tried out something, it didn't work, or maybe it was just some discovery. You tried out that something could work in multiple ways. I'm curious to see, because shell scripting is a very interesting topic, because there's so much you can do with it, so much creativity that can bring out of you in terms of just testing things out. It's a lot of fun. So just want to get that feedback. Does anybody have anything to share before we kick off? Or we are not yet at shell scripting, maybe we are a bit behind. No one? Okay. That's fine. Can always, maybe you're still settling down, coming from work or wherever you went to. So understandable. Can still put it in the chat once you settle down. Take a look at it. So we're about 10 of us here. Just give 1 more minute before I kick off and we dig into today's topic. All right. I think we can start. Everyone will join us as we proceed. So welcome again to today's class. Like I mentioned last week, we talked a lot about shell scripting and how that is useful within the context of DevOps engineering, creating resources. We wrote some shell scripts, some basic shell scripts last week. So today we're going to be talking about some more AWS resources, right? Talking about things like EBS volumes, EFS, EBS snapshots. We'll be talking about EC2 user data, and just see how all these things connect to each other. How all these things are useful within the DevOps culture. What we need to know about these things, how to use them, and all that. So, interesting thing about the EC2 user data was, I think someone asked a question as to how the shell script plays a role, and I think I kind of touched on the user data last week, but we'll still go deeper into it today. So, the EC2 user data, you can think about it in a very simple way, like an instruction you give to an EC2 machine to run every time it starts. I mean, when on its first start, actually, not every time it starts. So when an EC2 machine starts for the first time, EC2 user data is basically an instruction you give to that machine to do certain things. And that instruction is in form of a shell script, which is why we learned shell script last week, right? So, you know, the same way you would have a new employee on their first day of work, and they have some onboarding documents, that's what we call them, or we can say an instruction manual. The things they need to do, you need to go to HR and get your ID card. You need to do your thumbprint here. You need to get your office merge or whatever. That's what it's going to be like in the real life scenario. But for an EC2, it's a situation where you write a shell script that just tells the EC2 the task to perform when it starts up, like installing software or downloading files, those kind of things that will set that EC2 up to provide whatever service you need to provide, right? If it's a web server, you know, if it's a database, whatever it is, you're able to install. So this process of configuring a server on startup so that it has the necessary software that it needs in the IT space generally is called bootstrapping, right? Bootstrapping means launching commands when a machine starts, right? The commands are only run at the instance first starts, right? Interestingly, bootstrapping is a word that is used even outside of IT, but more prominently in IT. So when you say you bootstrap something, it means that you are able to determine what configuration that thing has every time a new instance of that thing is spun up. So a new instance of an EC2 instance is spun up because it's bootstrapped. You know exactly how it would look like. So you're able to kind of create clones of EC2 instances via bootstrapping, right? And clones in the sense that if one is running, you need an identical one because you've already used EC2 user data, and you're able to get exactly, the same configuration on both, right? And the configuration in this case is speaking to the software configuration, not necessarily to the hardware, like configuration like CPU, memory, and the likes, right? So EC2 user data is used to automate boot tasks such as installing updates, installing software, downloading common files from the internet, anything you can think of, right? The EC2 user data works with a script, like I mentioned. So you supply a script which runs with root user privilege, right? What we have here is an example of the EC2 user data script, and would actually run this example on the AWS console just so we can see how it works. But I'll just run through what this is, right? So it's very simple bash script like we discussed last week. You have your bin bash, right? The shebang, if you remember, it's called the shebang, that just defines what interpreter should be used to run the script, right? So now what this script is doing is just installing HTTPD. Very, very simple. Installing HTTPD. It's doing what you call a yum update. In Linux, right? The yum command is what you use to update the repository. Update the repository, install whatever you want to install. Basically, it's used to manage the repository. A repository just speaks of a collection of different software, right? So on Linux, there's on Amazon Linux specifically, there's the kind of repository it runs is called the yum repository, right? So you use the yum command to install anything you want. In this case, we want to install HTTPD. So we use yum install -y, which basically says answer yes to any prompt that comes up from this installation. Because whenever you want to install, it will ask you, are you sure you want to install yes or no? So since whenever you run a shell script, especially as a data script, user data script, you want to ensure that the script is not halted at any point or is not waiting for input at any point, right? A typical scenario is what I just talked about. You want to install something and usually in Linux, it would get your prompt to be sure you want to install it. After you run the command, it says, do you want to install this thing? Yes or no. So you either have to put type yes or type Y or type no or type N to either accept, to continue or to halt at that moment, like to cancel that operation. So if you write a user data script and for instance, you don't use -y like it has been used here, what would happen is that the script will just get stuck because it will be waiting for a response from you and it would never finish, right? It will just, get hung there, which is not good. So that's why you would usually see in user data script specifically, whenever things are installed, for instance, you would have -y, which just says, say yes to whatever the prompt is, because you know what the prompt is going to be. Like, you want to install this thing, so you don't need to, say no to the prompt, or you don't need to see the prompt yourself to be able to answer to it, right? To be honest, that's also the same principle a lot of people use when just writing normal shell script, even if they're not user data script. But the thing with shell scripts is sometimes you want to, as much as it's automated, right? You want to run that script, but you want to manage, or you want to, decide what happens. That is, if certain things get installed or not. You want to watch over that script. So as the script is installing or as the script is running, sometimes you are fine with just allowing it to ask you those questions, yes or no. You want to, be the one to confirm. Maybe it's something like a very critical script that could, mistakenly delete something, and you just want to be sure that you are reading everything correctly, you're responding, and everything does not just run and your whole server is dead or something like that, So there are situations for that, but most of the times, especially for things like yum install and update, you just use an -y to say yes. Then the other two commands, systemctl start HTTPD, systemctl enable HTTPD. Systemctl start HTTPD just says start this service, which is HTTPD. HTTPD is a web server service, Apache web server, right? Then systemctl enable HTTPD is saying enable this service to start up at boot time. Like whenever the server boots, this service should automatically start, right? So if the service is not enabled in this sense, when the server starts up, let's say there was a reboot or there was a shutdown and a startup, when the server starts up, it will not automatically start the service. You would have to go and manually run the command systemctl start HTTPD. Right. So I hope that makes sense as to what that script is doing. So let's move over to the console. Let me know if the screen is like the size of the screen is fine. If it's not, please put in the chat and I can resize it. Right. So let's just navigate to the EC2 console here to run this quick demo and see how that works out. Now in this demo, we'll just focus on the shell script, right? Maybe not focus too much on any of the other options that I'm choosing. We just want to focus on the shell script in this case. So I will try to launch an instance here. So let's call that instance Wisdoms web server. and I want to use Amazon Linux 2023, which is fine. T2 macro, which is fine. Okay, what I'll just is create a key pair. Let's call it wisdom WS key file. That's fine. So what I want to do, yes, fine. Just leave these default options for now. There's nothing here I want to select. It's also fine. Okay, so this is the part we want to get to, the user data, right? So in the user data part here, what I'll do is just to write out the scripts as we have it in. Let's just put, this is also a comment, so I'll just put it in. So if the line here starts with, besides the shebang here, if the line starts with a hash, that is a comment. So let's just write exactly what it is here. This line is really more for just remembering why we're writing this. It doesn't really affect the script. That's the commented line. So we'll have HTTPD, systemctl, start, HTTPD, systemctl, enable HTTPD. Okay, great. One thing I'll also do, let me just do something interesting here. Let's say echo sorry, .io to a file, let's say /mnt/ test.txt. So let's just see how this works. So I'm just going to launch the instance here. All right, so it's launching. Still pending. Just give it a second to start up. Okay, it's running, but it's still initializing, so we'll have to wait a bit still. That should mean that the user data script is still running. Initialization. It's taking a bit, should be done any moment now. Okay, what I'll do is just go to the, okay, let's even check. So we have something called the system log. I'll just open it and explain what all that is. Okay, it's still loading, so it's not available yet. But in the system log, we're able to just see the output of whatever user data script we run, just to see if it, can see the progress, like, oh, did it run successfully? Did it fail? And all that. So we'll check that once the status check is complete. Yeah, it's taking a bit of time. Okay, system status is just the instance status that is left. Okay, so it shows, oh, it did show running for a second. All right. Yeah, that's probably a bug with AWS. The fact that it shows running, then changes back to initializing. Okay, let's still take a look, see if this system log gives us anything yet. Not yet. Fair enough. Let me see if we'll be able to connect to it via the session manager. Okay, to use SSH. Okay, great. The status checks are passed. Let's see if we can view the system log now. All right, so this is the system log. Can seem a bit overwhelming, but this is quite readable once we have what we need from it. So I would, it's yeah. So you can look through the system log. There are some things you can ignore. What you are looking for is cloud. If I'm not mistaken, hold on, let me check. Yes, so you're looking for cloud init, right? Because it's the cloud init section that shows the commands have been run to initialize that particular machine, right? So if you can see here, this is a log of the output of the commands we run. So we said install HTTPD. You can see that it's saying here that HTTPD is being installed, right? Then you can see these are all the dependencies of HTTPD. Then it's downloading the packages and doing all what it needs to do, and it completed successfully, right? So this is basically just what we need to know that it completed successfully, right? What I'll try to do is I'll try to, just give me a second, I'll try to log in via my terminal right now and just show us that was also successful. And let me log in here, then I believe I would need to increase. Okay, so all right. So I think I called it, let's just go and get the connection, the IP that we need. Where is it? SSH client. So let's just do this and see if it works. Paste this here. Say yes. Oh, okay. So it says I need to change the permissions. Yeah, this is one thing. So you might have learned this when you download your private key to log into your S3 server. It needs you to set certain permissions on that private key. Okay, so it says permission denied, bad permissions. Okay. It did just, that is strange. Okay, let me try again. Oh, so it's saying that it's too open. Yeah, I think that's my mistake. This should be think this should be 6 and should be 600. I'm not mistaken. Let me try that again. Okay, yes, that was the correct one, 600. All right, so what I'm going to do is just to check the systemctl status of HTTPD. This shows if HTTPD is running, and as we can see, it's running, right? That means, our user data script worked. I'll do this lsmnt. What did I call it now? Okay, let me just do lsmnt. So yeah, I called it test. And so if I do cat mnt/test.txt, so this is direct.io. So basically everything that we wrote inside our script, our user data script, it ran successfully, right? So imagine, a situation where you are running an auto scaling group. If you guys remember where we talked about auto scaling groups, right? Let me just close this and shut it down for the sake of cost. If I continue, so I'm just gonna terminate this here. Okay, so that so now okay, so the concept is lost. And give me a moment. Okay, so we're back. So I'm just gonna. Yeah, apologies. I think my network got a bit shaky there, while I was speaking. Okay, so very quickly, I was just explaining that what we're trying to do here is to bootstrap our EC2s using user data scripts, right? We'll be learning how to write shell scripts, and we're just showing the practical explanation, or the practical use rather, of the shell scripts. So think of it this way. If you had to deploy 10 different EC2 instances to run your web servers, and each one of them needed to have maybe like 5 different software installed. You need to have HTTPD. You need to have a web server. Let's say you need to have a database. You need to download some files from your GitHub repo and all these kind of things, right? And you need to do that on 10 different EC2 machines. Rather than creating those EC2 machines, logging in and doing all that manually, and just write your shell script, put it in your user data file, and allow the script to run on runtime, and all the servers would then have all the information that you need, right? Another scenario is when we are doing auto scaling groups. We talked about the fact that auto scaling groups are able to increase the number of EC2 instances and decrease the number of EC2 instances based on the amount of traffic that is coming in, or based on the amount of system resources being used, like CPU and all that. So now there was a question that came, which was, how would you ensure that each of those EC2 machines have the software that you need when it's being spun up, and whenever the machines are being spun up? And user data scripts are the perfect answer for that, right? You can write your script, put it in the user data section of the configuration of the EC2, and every time it spins up an EC2 machine, everything you need to be installed will be installed on that machine. So you don't have to worry. You just know that the machine is going to have all the software that it needs, right? On that note, I want to just take a few questions before we move on, because the next thing we'll be moving on to would be a different topic. So let me just ask here if we have any questions. Timothy said it's 4 classes behind. Oh, wow. Timothy, you really need to catch up. Although the topic we're speaking of here, it's possible for you to still kind of get it individually, but you really need to get up to speed. So do we have any questions? Lekon, I hope that answered your question. Does what I said help? Love to get some feedback. Do we have questions on what I just did? And what, the slide we just talked about? Or is it well understood? Any questions? I'm not getting any feedback. Please, you could raise your hand up if you have a question, or if you're good, also just let me know that you're good. I just want to be sure that we're on the same page. Okay, Bolaji has his hands up. Bolaji, you can go ahead, please.
All right, thank you. Good evening, everybody. So this user data EC2 thing, in a situation where the installation has been completed and in terms of the demands on the infrastructure, what if the traffic, for example, goes down and the installation is no more needed? Is it going to be uninstalled or it's going to be idle somewhere?
Okay, great question. So remember that the way auto scaling groups work is that they spin up servers and they terminate servers when they spin up servers when they need more servers, and they terminate servers when they need less servers, right? So in the case of termination, it doesn't need to uninstall anything because it's going to still terminate the machine, right? The machine is going to be shut down and deleted. So there's no uninstallation process required. When there's less traffic, it just terminates the machine and that is it. But when there's more traffic, because it's spinning up a new machine, that's why it needs to install the different things. Or when it's scaling down, it no longer needs that machine. So it terminates it. If it's going to need a new machine later, it will create a new machine, right? So it doesn't keep machines around to reuse it. EC2 instances, that is, it just terminates it. So I hope that clears things up, Olaji.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, awesome.
Then also, all these installations, who determines? Is it that the machine automatically says, okay, I need this, I need to, or is manually configured into it? Or how do
And so
we
you,
know?
the DevOps engineer, you decide what needs to be installed. So it depends on the projects you are trying to do, the architecture, it depends on the reason why you are creating the EC2 machine, right? Like I said, if you are creating a web server, you want to install Apache and the likes. So you will be the one to decide, okay, these are the things I want to install on this machine. Because you can use the same EC2 machine as a database server. So if that's the purpose of the machine, you also write a script to install what needs to be installed, right? On AWS, maybe I'll just show you that before we move on. On AWS, if you try to launch an instance like I did, there's something called AMIs, which I'll touch on later, Amazon Machine Images. So application and OS images. So some of them already have some of these things pre-installed if you prefer to use that. So if I search for Apache here, oh, no, actually, let me check from here. All right, so okay, so you can see now, for instance, it's telling me that for SUSE Linux, it already has Apache pre-installed on it. So it's now your choice as the DevOps engineer to decide, do I want SUSE Linux with Apache installed, or do I want to install it myself, right? There are also many marketplace images that have different things. So for instance, you have Bitnami package for Bitnami packages for Apache Tomcat. So it's your choice. You are the one deciding. based on if you're maybe you're working as DevOps engineer and your development team says, oh, we need Node.js to run our application, then you take that feedback and you write a script for it to be installed on the EC2 servers, right? I hope that answers your question. Or
yes, thank you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Bolaji. All right, since we still have a number of slides to go, and seems like we're all following. Let me just ask Timothy, I don't know if you can speak. You said you're lost, you're 4 classes behind. Did anything that I said make sense, or do you have like any question from what I just spoke about specifically? Because even though you said you're behind, I know there's some, there are some of the topics we speak about that you can still like catch the concept of what we are saying, then go ahead to just like practice it later on. So I've unmuted you if you want to speak. Do you have any specific questions? You don't have any question, even though you don't understand. Okay. All right. So I'll just because of our time, I would say, go and try these things out and, come with your questions the next class, because I always try to take some questions before the class. But if you haven't, yes, rewatch the videos. If you haven't, studied or watched the videos and all that, it makes it quite difficult for me to help you because I don't have specific questions that I can answer, because I can't go back and, reteach all those classes again, right? So it's just kind of like helping each other here. It helped me to help you kind of situation. But yeah, do come with your questions, on the next class, and I will be able to take them. Right. So let's just quickly move ahead. A second. All right. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the Amazon EBS volume. Right. So the Amazon EBS volume is a network drive. It's not a physical drive. It's a network drive that is usually attached to an EC2 instance, right? It's what the EC2 instance uses to store the files that it needs to store, right? So you can think of the EBS volume like, like a flash drive that you can plug to different computers. Reason why I say a flash drive is because ECS volumes can be detached from an EC2 and attached to another EC2, right? So in a sense, it is like your hard drive on your computer, but it's harder to remove your hard drive from your computer and reattach, or your solid state drive reattach. But for an EC2, an EBS volume, you can easily just detach from an EC2 instance attached to another EC2 instance. So it has that interesting flexibility. So, like I mentioned, being a network drive, it uses network to communicate to the instance, right? Which means that depending on the kind of EBS volume you're using, there might be a bit of latency. Latency just speaks to the lag in time between, when you perform an action and when it actually happens, right? So when it completes, lag between when you send a message and when that message is received to at the destination where you're sending it to, right? So EC2 EBS volumes are very critical in working with EC2 specifically. They are used with other services on AWS, but mainly used with EC2s. One interesting thing about EBS volumes that you need to take note of is EBS volumes are tied to a specific availability zone. And what that means is if you create an EBS volume in US East 1, you cannot attach it to an EC2 instance in US East 1B. Sorry, if you create an EBS volume in US East 1A, you cannot attach it to an EC2 instance in US East 1B. You would have to move that volume from US East 1A to US East 1B by doing a snapshot, right, which we'll talk about. So you have to move that volume across. Basically, you are copying that volume, then you can use it in the other region. So just keep this in mind when you want to create volumes. For certain instances, you need to make sure that you're creating the volume in the same availability zone as the instance, right? Something also important to know about EBS volumes is that they come with something called provision capacity, which is measured in gigabytes and IOPS, right? Input output per second. That's what IOPS means. IOPS just speaks to the performance of that drive, like how fast it's able to receive, process, and output information. That's IOPS, right? The throughput of data on that drive. So you get billed for all the provision capacity that you use. And provision capacity, the way it works is you determine or you specify how much storage you want, right? So let's say you want 20 GB of the EBS volume. Even if you use just 1 GB out of the 20 GB, you still get billed for the 20 GB, right? So that's one thing to take note of. So you need to be very intentional about, the sizing of your EBS volume. So you need to determine, oh, okay, what am I using this EC2 instance for? The EC2 instance that is going to use the EBS volume, what am I using it for? Will it have a lot of things stored on it? If not, you might want to use the minimal amount needed to run that OS, which is like 8 GB, for instance, for Amazon Linux 2023, like you saw. I don't know if you caught when I did the demo, right? But the good thing is that you can increase the capacity of the drive over time. It can easily scale up. So if you want more storage, you can add more storage. If you want more storage, you can add more storage. So it's very versatile in that way. Let me just do a quick demo here. Do I have any volumes? Let me just show you what we're talking about. I feel like I may not have any volumes. Okay, I don't have any volumes, but let me just create one just to show you. Right, so this is, or let me run through the process. So when I talked about provision capacity, when I spoke about gigabytes and IOPS, this is what I meant, right? So you can specify the number of gigabytes you want, number of IOPS you want. Then the availability zone is very important. You have to make sure that you create it in the same availability zone as your EC2 instance, right? We'll talk about volume types in a bit. There are different kinds of volume types. Right. So let's just move ahead. So the EBS volume types, there are about 6 of them. Right. Just think of the different volume types as different variants of the EBS volume based on what your need is. Okay, awesome. I'm so sorry. Something went on with my Teams. It got it just hung, and I couldn't leave to rejoin. I'm not sure what went wrong with Teams, and I had to restart everything, even restart my whole system to get it to work. But we're back. So sorry for the break in transmission. I see Oyerinde has his hand up. I don't know if that was because you wanted to indicate that I wasn't audible anymore. Okay, I think so. All right. Thanks for the messages in the chat. Apologies once again. So we'll just kick on with what we were saying. I know I was talking for a bit and you weren't hearing me. So I'll just quickly go through the volume types again, because they are very, very critical to what we, when you're working with EC2s, right? So I was saying the GP classes, that's the GP2 and GP3, they are SSDs, right? And the GP means general purpose, right? And they balance price and performance. So they have really good performance and reasonable pricing, and they work for a variety of workloads. So you have web servers, you have development environments, small to medium databases. They are great for all that, right? But if you have applications that demand top-notch performance, like consistently low latency or high throughput, then you should be looking at using the IO class. That's the IO1 and the IO2, right? So they have the highest performance of SSDs on AWS, but of course that comes at a higher price, right, than the GP2 and GP3. So if you want to do things like data analytics, real-time data analytics, where a lot of data is moving in and moving out very quickly, you want to run critical databases, large databases, you would use IO for your volumes, right? The IO class. And then you have the ST classes, sorry, the ST and the SC classes, right? These are HDDs. They are lower cost, right? The SC1 is the lowest cost. And, you use this for things that don't need very high performance. Maybe you just want to store data in needs for long-term purposes. You want to store backups, you want to store logs. You want to use them for, data warehousing, where, you want to do some analysis on the data, but you don't need it, you don't need the results very quickly. Something, more for like testing environments and all that. This is fine for those kind of environments, although you can't use the HDDs as boot volumes. Again, that means your OS cannot reside on these HDDs. You can only use them externally to store data in them, right? Because for your OS, it needs, high performance or reasonable performance, let me say. So it needs an SSD basically, right? So you would use the GP2 or GP3 or IO1 or IO2 for your boot volumes, right? So you can just, follow the link here, which just speaks about the different volume types, and just read about them just to see more detail into them. The reason why we show you this, or we're teaching this, is just so you know what to pick in what scenario, because a lot of DevOps engineering is really just having the ability to make the right decisions for your organization or for the projects that you're working on. So there are many options, many tools, many variations you can use, but if you know what each of them have in terms of capability and what they can provide, and you are able to take that and look at the requirements for your project, you're able to make the best decision in terms of price and performance for that project, right? That's usually the big struggle, the struggle of price and performance. There are some things you can choose that give you great performance always, but the price is at the end of the month is going to be scary. So a good DevOps engineer just knows how to get that balance right. So I'm going to talk about, we've talked about EBS volumes and EBS volume types. We're going to talk about something called EBS snapshots, right? EBS snapshots is a form of backup of your EBS volume at a point in time. So you use snapshot when you want to create a kind of like basically, as it says, a snapshot. It's like when you take a picture of someone at a certain moment. Let's say they were smiling when you took that picture. That picture will always have them smiling. They won't change in that picture. So when you take a snapshot of an EBS volume, you have like a copy of that EBS volume, right? But at a certain state. That means if anything changes in the EBS volume after you take that snapshot, it will not reflect in that snapshot, right? So the essence of the snapshot is to do backups. Let's say you want to test out something new on your, maybe you want to do an update. Yes, you want to do an update on your EC2 machine, and you're not sure if it's going to break your existing applications, right? So you might want to do a snapshot first, have a backup, then do the updates and check. If something goes wrong, you can restore that snapshot, right? So by restoring that snapshot, it will take the EBS volume back to the state when you did the snapshot. So let's say today being the 6th of April, let's say you did a snapshot on the 1st of April, right? And you've seen that you've encountered the problem in your EC2. Once you restore that snapshot, it takes you back. You have the data up until the 1st of April. So everything from 2nd of April to 6th of April will no longer exist. And there are situations where you are fine with that, when that is fine for your requirements, right? I'll give you one of those situations. Let's say you have some sort of malware that gets on your machine and you are not aware, and the malware came into that EC2 instance on the 2nd of April, and you want to recover to a point where you didn't have that malware. You don't care if you lose any data, right? That's fine. So you can use, if you had created an EBS snapshot, you'll be able to restore, right? So the standard, let's say in the technology world as a whole, really, the backup kind of standard is for you to do snapshots every day, to do backups every day, right? So that would mean that, and keep that backup for at least 30 days, right? Some people do more, some people do less, some people do 7 days, but the standard usually is just, you do backups every day, you keep the backups for 30 days. If anything happens within those 30 days, you are able to revert to that point in time when you did a snapshot, right? So in that case of a malware or ransomware, I'll give you examples. I have personally, worked on servers that had ransomware on it in some companies that I've worked on. So although those were Windows machines back then anyways, and we had to revert to a backup. That was the only option because there's nothing we could do about it. And if we didn't have a backup, would have just lost all the data, right? So, but reverting to a backup, it meant that we lost some data, but not all. We lost just very little data, maybe 1 or 2 days worth of data, right? So EBS snapshots in this case are very, very critical to your data backup and recovery strategies, right? Your data protection strategies. So they protect against accidental deletion. So sometimes it might not be a malware or some ransomware. It might just be you making a human error of deleting something you aren't supposed to delete, and you need to get that file back, right? So in this case, if you need to get a singular file back, for instance, you can leave the existing EC2 instance, use that EBS snapshot to create a new EC2 instance. And when you create that new EC2 instance, you just take the data out from the snapshot, right, from the EBS volume from that day when you did the snapshot, and copy it to your existing EC2 instance, right? So it just helps protect data. You can use it for disaster recovery, like I mentioned. And if you want to clone data across multiple availability zones, like I mentioned earlier, you can just take the snapshot of one EBS volume and store that snapshot in the other take the snapshot of one EBS volume from an availability zone, in this case, availability zone A, then move it to availability zone B, right? So it just helps you, copy or migrate data across different availability zones. Now, as regarding snapshots, you don't necessarily have to, when you want to take a snapshot of an EBS volume, you don't necessarily have to detach the volume to do the snapshot, but it is recommended if you can, depending on the kind of data you are storing on it, right? Sometimes, if the data is if the rate of change of that data on that volume is very high, doing that snapshot while your application is running can provide some inconsistencies, right? So sometimes it's good to just detach, but depending if your application, the rate of data change is not very high, the snapshot will run very smoothly and everything will be fine, right? So snapshots are really like an insurance policy for your data. It just gives you a peace of mind knowing that you have a backup in cases of emergency, right? So as a DevOps engineer, it's very critical because you want to be sure that you can always recover no matter what the disaster is. Now, before I go on to this, I just want to get your feedback if you have any questions about EBS volumes, EBS volume types, or EBS snapshots before we go on to EFS. So please, if you do have any questions, you can put it in the chat. You can indicate by raising up your hand, and I'll give you room to ask those questions. Also, if it's all clear, if everything I've said is good and it makes sense and you understand, you can also put it in the chat just so we know and that you're good. Okay. Namdi says it's not clear to him. So, Namdi, would you like to ask? Let me know what exactly is not clear. Let me give you the ability to unmute. We'll come to you, Balaji. Namdi, could you just give some insights into what is not clear so that I can address it?
If we can, since you came back, I've not really gotten what you were saying, like the whole EBS thing. Only if you could go back a little bit and explain that I might understand.
Okay. So is it from here?
Yep.
Okay. So that means you understood this first slide of EBS volume. Is that correct, Namdi?
If you can, I don't know. I don't think you were here when you were on this slide there when you left the country. So probably I didn't get the. If you can quickly talk about the whole EBS thing and EC2 thing, I don't know. I'm kind of lost or something.
Oh, okay. Have you been on the subsequent classes where we talked about EC2 and the like? Just to be sure. Okay. And you were on the last class also, right? That's a shell scripting one. Okay. Awesome. Okay, that's fine. Before I take about this question and also before of time, I will just quickly give an overview of everything that I've said. You can still watch the recording. But when I do that, you can just let me know if it now makes sense. So EBS volumes are basically network drives, right? They are like the storage for the EC2 instances. So the EC2 instances need somewhere to store its data, right? And EBS volume is that storage. And one of the things I mentioned was that an EBS volume can be detached from one EC2 instance and attached to another EC2 instance, right? Think of it like a flash drive where you can store data in. On your computer, you can plug it to one laptop, put your data in, touch it, put it to another laptop, that's how an EBS volume is. One important thing I mentioned was that EBS volumes are locked to a specific availability zone. That means when you create an EBS volume, you have to state what availability zone you want it to be in. So if you have an EC2 instance in availability zone A, and you have an EBS volume in availability zone B, you cannot attach the EBS volume in availability zone B to the EC2 instance in availability zone A, right? So basically they have to merge in terms of availability zone. If not, you have to do a snapshot to move it across to the other availability zone, right? I also mentioned that the way AWS charges you for EBS volumes, by the way, EBS means elastic block storage. Maybe I did mention that earlier. Elastic block storage, right? So the way you get charged for EBS volumes is that if you say you want a 20 GB EBS volume, even though you are using 1 GB out of the whole 20 GB, and you have 19 GB free, they'll still charge you for the whole 20 GB. So you have to be very intentional when you choose the size of EBS volume you want, but you can always increase the size anytime you want. Then I talked about the different classes of EBS volumes, the GP classes, which are general purpose solid state drives, right? And the classes are basically just different types of EBS volumes that give different types of performance at different prices. That's really what this EBS volume classes are. Right. So, I mean, you can think of it in this way, like when you have a car, for different cars, you have some that are 4-cylinder, you have some that are 6-cylinder, right? They have different levels of performance and different prices. You have some cars that are used for racing, Formula One cars, and you have some cars that you use for commercial, right? Maybe buses and all those kind of things. Motorcycles, different from buses, different from the cars you use to to race and all that. So different performance, different prices. EBS volumes, the same thing, right? So your GP2, GP3s, they are general purpose. They are kind of in the middle. They have a good price and a good performance. Your IO, right? They have the highest performance. You can think of them like your Formula One cars. Your GP2s, you can think of them like your regular Toyota Corollas, right? Good performance, good price, right? Then your ST1, SC1s, you can look at them as, let's say, your coastal buses, right? They can hold a lot of things inside them. You can store a lot of things inside them, but you're not going to get high performance, right? But you can move a lot of people across, right? You can even keep things in the bus for a long time. Just park it at home, whatever. So that concept just shows that depending on what you want to do with with the EBS volume, you choose the type that suits your purpose, right? So if you want something fast, you choose the one that is fast, but just know that it's going to be a higher price. If you want something in the middle, you choose it. If you want something, lower cost, right? But what I mentioned about the lower cost ones, the HDDs here, is that although they are low cost and they are great for storing data for a long time, right? You cannot use them as boot volumes, and boot volumes just means where the OS is stored, the operating system, right? So on every machine, you would have an operating system disk or operating system volume. Then you can now have external volumes, right? On that machine. It's just like when you have your main hard drive or SSD within your laptop, then you have like an external hard drive, right? So the main hard drive on your laptop is where the OS is stored, right? So you can't use this ST and SC for OS volumes. You can only use them as external volumes, while you can use the GPU and the IO for OS volumes because they have the performance that can carry OS volumes, but the HDDs don't have that performance, right? Yeah, and I think that, okay, so I talked about EBS snapshots too. And EBS snapshots just means taking a backup of that EBS volume at a point in time. So if I take a snapshot today at 8:30, right, that means it has created a copy of the EBS volume that has all the data at 8:30. So if, tomorrow I find out that, there's an issue with the machine, I need to restore back to the snapshot that I created at 8:30 today, I can easily just restore. But I have to keep in mind that the data between 8:30 and let's say 5 o'clock tomorrow, 5 p.m. when I notice that I need to restore, that data will be lost, right? And if that data loss is acceptable, that's fine. You can always restore to the snapshot that you did today. Right. And I mentioned you can also copy, I think I already mentioned this, you can copy snapshots across different availability zones or regions. So snapshotting and doing backups of EBS volumes, they are good for data backup, for disaster recovery if you have any issue and you need to restore back to an earlier point in time. So Nnamdi, I don't know if that's kind of give a quick overview of what we've been talking about. Does that help?
Yeah, I'm better now.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for giving that feedback. It's really helpful. You can still watch the video, the things I said previously. It would really help. So I have Bolaji here. Bolaji, I would allow you to speak now so you can ask your question before I answer the question in the chat.
All right, thank you so much, Wisdom, and thank you also, Nnamdi, because in the process of you answering these questions, some of my questions have been answered.
Oh, wonderful.
But yes, really. But most of us, or let me say some of us, are coming from Windows environments. So literally most things you say in our head, we're trying to mirror it and try and imagine what we already know and what you're introducing to us. So for example, this EBS2, when you were mentioning OS, now when you said there are some that you can mirror OS on and there are some you cannot mirror OS on, so that has been sorted. But really, in this EBS2, in a nutshell, can you compare it as it is not bootable, right? You can't boot OS from it, but you can store. You can.
The EBS volume, right? Is that what you're speaking about? Yes. No, that's why I said here. I said you can use GP2, GP3, IO1, IO2 as boot volumes. Boot volumes means that you can boot an OS from it. Yeah.
Okay.
But the ST1, ST1, you can't use them as boot volumes. Yes.
Okay. So then also, okay. So in network drives in Windows environments, you just it's more like a storage that virtual storage that you create for maybe a user, probably in an AD environment, so with a specific storage capacity. Now, how do you compare it with this EBS volume?
Okay, I understand your
because
question.
the H drive, you can't boot from H drive,
Yes.
So how do you compare? That's just
okay. So maybe the term network drive is used. I think it's used differently on AWS and it's used differently on Windows, right? And interestingly enough, I actually have a slide to explain what is similar to the H drive you're talking about, the network drive on Windows, which is called EFS, right? Elastic file storage. So the network drive on Windows just stores files. It's something that you create somewhere and you give access to it. The reason why it's called a network drive on AWS is because the EBS volume in this case is virtual, right? And it's virtual, it's created on AWS's hardware somewhere that you can't see, of course. But AWS connects that EBS drive to your EC2 instance using over the network. That's the only reason why it's called a network drive. But on Windows, when you define a network drive, is different from what I'm saying. On Windows, of course, it's also some physical disk somewhere, but you are giving access to a network drive, and drive is basically a network kind of folder, right, where you can store files and retrieve files. So what I would say is maybe don't look at it from the Windows point of view, because it can be confusing. They have different names. Here we're talking about Linux, here we're talking about Windows. So the network drive is not the same thing. So if I would compare it, I would say EBS volume is talking about your C drive, right? Your C drive, your hard drive, your solid state drive. That's what EBS volume is talking about. Yes, not your network drives in terms of file storage and all that. So I don't know if that clears things up. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much for your question. Great. I was actually going to answer a question easy. But let me answer that question first, and if there's any, I'll still give you the opportunity to speak if there's any other thing you want to clarify. So you said taking snapshot is very important, right? But taking snapshots probably on a daily daily basis is very expensive. It's actually not very expensive. AWS has made it cheap, right? It's rather cheap to take snapshots. EBS volumes are not expensive. Well, depending on the size and depending on the type of volume. So for instance, if you're using an IO volume, like I mentioned, and let's say you have like a 200 GB drive and you're taking snapshots every day, yeah, it is going to be expensive. But if you are using something like an 8 GB GP2 or GP3 drive, it's going to be relatively cheap, right? So in a sense, you are right, depending on the type and the size of that volume. So you have to look at that and accept and change your strategy based on the size and the type of volume you are using, right? But most people would use GP2 or GP3 and taking snapshots with them. In a month they'll maybe cost you maybe like $10-15 or something. It's not really very expensive. But I sense you might still have a different question to that which you put in the chat. So what I'll do is give you the opportunity to speak, and you can let me know what the question is, or you can also let me know if there's no question, so we can go ahead. So Eze, you can go on.
You've answered my question.
Oh, awesome. I'm glad. All right, thank you so much. So Chike said, hello, Wisdom. Is there a chance we will touch the Windows platform? So it's not in your curriculum, right? To at least for this segment of the course, as far as I'm aware, for the Windows platform. So the Windows platform is not really within the scope of what we are trying to do in terms of DevOps and all that. If you are doing DevOps, I'll tell you the truth, you'll hardly work on the Windows platform, right? It's not that you won't, you will, depending on the organization you're working on. And the cases where you would work on Windows there are situations where the software you're working with is so proprietary that it might not run on Linux, which is rare these days, right? Or maybe it's a Microsoft product that only runs on Windows. So for that sake, it won't be like a good use of your time. Everybody here on this call to really touch on Windows, because everything is integrated around Linux these days, and that's the truth, right? I personally haven't worked on the Windows machine in close to 5-6 years. I haven't had a reason to work on the Windows machine in almost 5 or 6 years. That's to tell you how rare it is, right? So it just depends on the organization, but most of them you would work for would not see, you wouldn't have the situation. Even if they are running on Azure, you would still see that they use Linux on Azure, most times, right? So Chike, I hope that answers your question. Okay, so I don't know if you have any more questions. We have less than just about 20 minutes left. So what I'll do is to run through the remaining slides that we have. We just have 3 slides left. And thanks, guys, for the questions. I mean, they're really, really helpful, and the feedback, even Namdi just letting me know that what I said wasn't clear. You know, this feedback really helps us ensure that you get the best out of the class. And if there's anything we need to re-explain, it will be re-explained, anything to be clarified, it will be clarified, right? Well, thanks a lot, guys. So moving ahead, we have the elastic file system. The elastic file system. So the concept of the elastic file system is that it is a managed NFS, right? And managed NFS in the sense that it's a managed NFS that can be mounted on many EC2 instances. So I'll explain. I know that might sound a bit complicated. Managed here just means AWS manages the infrastructure, the back end of the NFS, right? That means you don't have to do any NFS configuration. Now, you might ask, what is NFS? So NFS stands for Network File System, right? It's a distributed file system protocol that allows a user on a client computer to access files over a network as if they were stored locally on that client's own hard disk, right? So you heard Bolaji talking about, you know, a network drive in Windows. I was talking about like a H drive. You know, if you worked on Windows, maybe in the corporate environment, you see that you always have your hard drive, which is your C drive, but you always have sometimes some extra drive where company files are stored that people can access, you know, different, I mean, files for different departments are stored there, not on your local drive, but you can access it as though it is on your local drive, right? I don't know if, you know, you guys have experienced that. So that uses the NFS protocol, right? NFS just ensures that you're able to access a file on your machine as though, access a file that is on a remote machine as though it was on your machine, right? So what it does is just, it will mount a folder, or in this case, a directory on your machine and ensure that you can access it over that NFS protocol. It's a very interesting protocol. You can read up on it. It's something that is used in a lot of places, right? So the purpose of it is just really to be able to share files across multiple users. So in NFS architecture, you have one server that has the files, then you then have multiple NFS clients. So those clients will now mount that same folder or directory from that NFS server on their individual machine. So you can have one NFS server and 20 NFS clients, and everybody will be able to access the files as if they were on their laptop. So that's the concept. Now, in AWS, they are providing this service in something called Elastic File System. And in this case, it's a managed service. That means you don't manage the server part of it, right? Like you would an EC2. They only provide you like a URL which you can use to mount it on your EC2, right? So if you go, let me go to the console. Let me do a quick demo to go to the console so that it makes more sense what we're saying, right? So let me go to the EFS console. So you can see manage file storage for EC2. I hope my screen is big enough for us to see. So this is NFS. So if I wanted to create an NFS file system, all I'll do here is I'll just give it a name and say create a file system. Let's say Dare IOFS, right? So I'll just choose a VPC here, then I click create. So you see what will happen now. It's creating, right? So you see that, okay, now it's created. So this file system can store as much data as you want in it. So when you come here and you click view details for the file system, what you see here is that it will give you, there's a DNS name here. And this DNS name is what you use to go and mount the file system on your EC2 instance, right? So let me see if I can quickly show you this. So if you click attach, right? Okay, so if you click attach, you can see there are different tools you can use to mount here. It's just giving you the command. That's why it's managed. It creates everything at the back end, just gives you the command. If you take this command and you go and you mount it on your EC2 machine, you would have, you know, that's you'll have it as though it was actually on the machine, right? I wish I still had this. Let me quickly spin up. Let me quickly spin up another instance just to show you this. I think our time is a bit gone. So what I'll do, I'll just leave it running in the background. Let's call this test server, because I think it'd be nice for everybody to just, you know, see how this works. So I can proceed with everything and just launch this instance, right? Okay, so this is going to launch. Okay, I'll explain that, Chike. That's a good question. I'll explain that. Right. So, so this, yeah, you can use these commands to just mount, you know, mount the drive on your machine. So, S3 is NFS is a file system storage. One major difference between EFS and S3 is that EFS it has like significantly higher performance in terms of like throughput, right? How fast you can access that data. Because for instance, EFS, you can mount it on your EC2 instance, right? S3, although recently they've created a tool that you can mount it, but it's usually not advisable to mount it on your EC2 like and use it, you know, for day-to-day operation. So S3 is meant for more long-term storage, right? EFS is meant, you know, for more transactional storage day-to-day. And that important difference is that EFS is a lot more expensive than S3, which is why I'm even going to, you know, at some point delete this. It's a lot more expensive than S3, probably more than 20 times as expensive, but it has far better performance than S3 in terms of accessing, you know, that data. So if you're going to, for instance, if you're going to store 10 GB on S3 and store 10 GB on EFS, they might charge you like maybe $5 per month. On S3, they might not even charge you anything because it's so small on S3. Like it might be 0.1 or $0.2 or something like that, right? So cost and performance is a major difference between the two of them. This is still initializing. Let me see if I'm able to connect even while it's initializing. Let me just, I know it took a while before, but let me see. So I would increase this screen for us to see. Okay, so it's up now, right? So what I would do is I would copy the command from the EFS. Where is it now? I think I had that here. So I'll copy this command and just try to mount it. Let's see if that works. Okay, so it needs a mount point. So I can just say make directories. So you need a mount point, which in this case I can say EFS, which is fine. Let's try to mount it. What CLI is this? This is the when you SSH into EC2, right? This is what you get. Give me a second. Maybe I should try NFS. I think there might still need to be some tools that I will need to use the first command that I don't have installed. And because of time, let me see if this one works. So it's taking some time. Okay. There's also an option to mount via IP address if you want. But DNS would usually work. Yeah, I see it's taking a bit of time to launch. Yeah. Okay, maybe I would try mounting it on /MMC. That might see faster. No. So you can from here see some some help documents if you want to get some help with mounting on EC2 Linux, to mount on a file system. You just do this, which is basically what we are doing. If you want to mount with the DNS name, with the IP address and all that. Okay, maybe I did because I didn't do RM IPF, EFS, then all right, so just want to make sure that so if I do this, I should be able to mount using the mount help bar. Except I need something else to be installed. Yes. Okay, it needs me to install this. So let's try and do that very quickly. Install this -y. Okay, so let me see if it mounts now. It's no longer showing that error, but it's still taking a while to mount. Okay, mount attempt failed due to timeout. So that might just be, what I can do is just check if what availability zone this is in. Let's see. So, that's the availability zone. Here, US is 1D. Okay, maybe what I can do is try to mount with an IP from US is 1D. See if that works out. Let's give it a second. Let's just check if there's any other comments. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so it doesn't look like it's gonna mount, but it's basically the same concept, really. What I could do is just check it out and show us again during the next class. But if you would, follow the same instructions, I'm sure it would work on your end. Probably just availability zone differences or some other things I might need to install that is making it, to time out and all that. But I don't want to delay, the end of the class. But the idea with it really is just being able to have this managed service where you can create this file system, and the backend for creating. Sorry, I'm just deleting this. So the backend for this file system is on scene to you because it's managed by AWS, right? So all they do is just provide you with that command, which would enable you to. Oh, okay. I know why it didn't work actually. It was because of the security groups. I didn't allow EFS. I didn't allow EFS. In that case, let me just quickly create another one. Let's just say test. So if we go to the security group here that we used, and I come here, launch wizard, and I edit the inbound rules, I should be able to see EFS. Okay, well, we can check here, right? So we can see, oh, this is networking. It's still creating some of the IP addresses. What I'll do for a test is just allow all TCP and allow all UDP just to test in this case, right? Actually, just to allow all traffic, just to confirm that that is not the issue here. So I was logged into the server. I'll just log back in here and go back, copy that command that enables us to attach. Right, and let's try that again and see. If you to resolve, check the file system IDs. Interesting. Okay, let's look at the file system ID again. Maybe it's still coming up. Second. Okay, that's fine. Let's just finish up with the slides. But this is a very simple concept. I just wanted to give us a quick demo. I didn't plan to do that before because of the time, but I thought it'd be nice for us to just see what that looks like. So the important things to know about EFS really is that it works with EC2s in a multi-AZ fashion. That means it can connect to various availability zones, right? So if you have instances like you see on the screen in 3 different AZs, they can all connect to EFS at the same time. So what that gives, the advantage that gives you is, let's say you have a document that's, you want to be available to more than one EC2 instance, right? And you want fast access to that document, like a network drive. What you can do is create EFS and mount it on the different EC2 instances. and they would be able to access that file, each of them, like you would a network drive on Windows, right? Interestingly, EFS can also be used, of course, on Windows. You can also mount it on Windows, right? They have tools to do that. So in a situation where, and I've done this in the past, where you have a hybrid cloud, that is one that you have a connection from your cloud, your AWS environment to your on-premise environment, right? Let's say you have some VPN or something, a virtual private connection. What can happen is you can create this EFS here and be able to mount it on your on-premise using the IP address, right? So you have something in AWS and you're able to mount it on your machines on-premise as a network drive, using the VPN, right? So it's a very interesting service that you can use for many things. But if you are trying to choose a service to share files amongst multiple instances, EFS will be the service to go for, right? EFS will be the one that makes sense to go for. If you want those EC2 instances to access the files simultaneously, and there should be some consistency between them, EFS will be the one to go for, right? So it's highly available, it's highly scalable, although expensive. Like I said, it's 3 times the price of GP2, 3 times, right? So we can imagine maybe like 3.5 times the price of GP3, because GP3 is even cheaper than GP2, right? But you only pay for what you use. So if you store 5 GB of data, you pay for only 5 GB. Unlike GP2, where if you provision 20 GB and you store only 5 GB, you still pay for 20 GB. Right. So it's quite interesting in that sense. So one of the last few things we'll be talking about are AMIs. So an AMI means an Amazon machine image, and you've seen this in multiple places before. If you recall, when I came to create this EC2 machine, and I was trying to choose, and I click launch machine here, and it shows me, yes, you can see it here, Amazon machine image. It's just a template that contains software configurations required to launch the instance you want to launch. Like I mentioned, it has different softwares installed already. So this is the Amazon Linux 2023 image, right, created by Amazon, but you can also choose an Ubuntu AMI. You can even run a Mac OS AMI, right? And access it like you're on a Mac machine. You can run the Windows AMI. So AMI are just images that have software installed, and you can use those images to create your EC2 instance, right? They're just like, I don't want to say boot images, but yeah, they're just operating system images that you can use to create your EC2, right? So these AMIs you can see here, the ones provided by AWS and other vendors, but you can also create your own AMI, right? You can decide that you want a specific set of software installed, and you can create your own AMI. So if you want to create your AMI, it involves coming to the AMIs here under images, right? And you can use the EC2 image builder, or you can, if you have let me see, we have a volume here. If you have a volume here, you can do a snapshot, and from a snapshot, you can create an AMI. That's another way to do it, right? So what AMIs enable you to do effectively is to have faster boot and configuration time, because all your software is already pre-packaged on the AMI. So in this case, you don't even need to run user data scripts. because everything is already on the AMI. Right. So you only run user data script if you know you need things that are not on the AMI, right? So you can add your own software and everything, right? So AMIs are built for a specific region. So if you have an AMI on one region, you cannot use it on the other region except you copy it across to the other region. But it's quite easy to just copy across, right? And you have you can launch EC2 instances from your own AMI or a public AMI from AWS, for instance, like we did, or an AMI on the marketplace, right? So something you can even potentially do is create your own AMI and publish it on the marketplace to sell. If someone wants it, you know, there are some AMIs there that if you check, there's extra cost to them. It might just be like $1 more than the normal, you know, Amazon price because they have done extra work to configure it, you know, in a way that someone might want that particular configuration. So yeah, AMIs are just so they help, you know, give you speed and efficiency because you don't have to, you know, do many configurations or any configuration at all when you are spinning up new servers. And you don't have to run user data scripts, right? Even though some situations it's best to run user data scripts. You already have your customization there. And you can use it to easily version your configurations. So I can create an AMI today and say, okay, this AMI is version 1. It has so software. I can create another one tomorrow and say it's version 2. It has so software, right? So it gives you that flexibility. And the last thing is just the process of creating an AMI, right? So like I mentioned, you can start your EC2 instance, do whatever customizations you want on it, stop the EC2 instance, then build the AMI, then you can launch new instances from the the EMI, sorry, the EMI you just created, right? And let me just give us a snapshot of that. So I have my EC2 instance running here. So I can just come here and stop it, instance state stop. Just wait for it to stop very quickly. It's still stopping. Okay, so when it stops, I will be able to actually it's from here. I'll be able to create an image, right? So let's just give it a second. Okay, so now it's stopped. So I can come to actions, come to image here, and I can say create image, right? So an image also referred to as an AMI defines like we said. So here is the process of me creating an AMI. I'll just give it a name, a description, and that's all really. That's all, right? So it's quite simple to create an AMI. And in the real sense, if I was going to create an AMI from this machine, I would have, you know, gone into that machine, installed everything I want to install. Maybe I want to install HTTPD, the web server, and all those kind of things before I then create that AMI, which is, you know, an image of everything that I need. So because of our time, I think I'll just stop here and just see if we have any last questions before we close up. Any questions as regards EFS or the AMIs that I talked about? Does anyone have any questions? I think I already spoke to the ones in the charts. Have any extra questions? Quickly touch on them. Okay, so Timothy has a question. Okay, so oh, Timothy, thanks for just sharing your heart out on this question that you wrote. To your question more directly, yes, I believe that everything you are learning here, it's not even just a belief. Everything you're learning here would be very, very useful when you work with an organization as a DevOps engineer. It's very, very useful for your day-to-day operations. I don't mean to say that everything you're learning here, you will do each and every one of them every single day, no. But the concepts of the different things we are learning help you to have a good understanding of, the whole the AWS environment, different services, the whole perspective, or the whole DevOps perspective, let me say, right? Because as a DevOps engineer, as much as you write CI/CD pipelines and all those automation and all that, you'd be required to make decisions also, right? You'll be required to, do things like backups, do things like restorations of backups. You'll be required to create AMIs like we have seen here, because it's part of your work. So everything depends on the business need, right? For me, in my experience, when I was learning, I didn't have like all this information in one place as you have it on this course. So that's why I find this course very, very helpful if one like puts their mind to it and practices it every day. For me, I just had it in bits and pieces. I was only able to watch one YouTube video from here, another YouTube video from here. I didn't really have the whole perspective as to how everything connects together, right? So what I would say is you just need to dedicate some time. I think for you it's majorly catch up, Timothy, because you mentioned it a few times that you've not you're a bit behind. So I think it's just for you to dedicate some time. Anything worth doing is worth doing well. Dedicate some time to catch up. I remember when I first started learning Linux, just Linux, not even DevOps. I was just learning Linux, and for about 2 weeks, every single day, all I was reading was a Linux book and practicing commands and researching. Right. Back then I wasn't in a job, so I think it actually did help me because I had that time, but it needs that level of commitment to it. It's not, something you can spend only 30 minutes on a day and you'll be fine. You actually need to take time, especially when you've not been following up with the different classes. You need to take that time, just settle down, go through the classes, the different recordings, note down your questions, ask them on the Slack channel or bring them to class here, whatever they are, and you will just progress in that knowledge, right? So the knowledge progresses and they build on each other, which is why it's good to not, miss any of the classes, right? So I would just encourage you to not give up, because the thing about DevOps, and to be honest, IT as a whole is that once you understand it, you understand it. Once you grasp the concepts, no one can take it from you. But you need to apply yourself to really grasp what is being taught, right? That's why I always ask if you have any specific questions, because if you have learned to a certain extent, you'll be able to know what you don't understand so that you can ask that question, then it can be answered. But if everything kind of needs to be re-explained from scratch, then there's like a foundational challenge there in the sense that, there still needs to be some moving done. So, Timothy, I'll just encourage you, don't give up. It's worthwhile. I'll tell you the truth. It's worthwhile. I know, getting into this career has changed my own life, right? It's, I believe, one of the best things I did. So I would say, if this is your goal also, don't give up. Just be encouraged, try to dedicate some time, and do some reading and practicing. Like there's no substitute for reading and practice. Even this class is not a substitute for reading and practicing. This class, to be honest, should mostly, embellish your knowledge, clarify things, because it's just a 2-hour class. If you think about it, right? But it should give you, perspective on things that you would want to read up more on, and practice more, right? So I hope that helps, Timothy. I hope that helps. I'll hope to just see you next class with some questions, right? With some questions from your catch-up session. So please, does anyone have any other question? Awesome. Glad to hear that, Timothy. Any other questions? If not, we'll shut down now so that we don't take too long. You're very welcome, Timothy. Very much welcome. All right, guys. If there are no questions, thanks for coming to today's class. Right. Please keep up the, will I say ginger in this case? Be motivated, because the end results, just see your goal ahead. The end result is definitely going to be better than where you are now, right? Things would get clearer if you just keep pushing on. So just want to encourage you guys, and have a good evening. I'll see you next week. Bye.